This panel is basically revisiting and having a conversation about some of the issues that we discussed in the January issue of the NACLA report on the Americas, this year's January issue, which was basically assessing sort of 1 year into the Obama presidency what we really know about his Latin America policy and what we can expect moving forward. When we started to put the issue together, things were still very much up in the air. Valenzuela was still being held up. He hadn't yet been confirmed. The Honduran coup had happened, but things were still unclear as to what was going to actually turn out. The Colombian base agreement had just been signed. So we had some sort of vague inklings of where Obama was going to go. And we realized in the process of putting this issue together under the leadership of the NACLA editor, Pablo, here in the front, that the sort of overriding issue for a lot of these things was the theme of militarization, that what we actually see in Latin America is a continuation of a militarization of various aspects of U.S. Latin America policy that's been happening for the last 30 years. And what we're really seeing is that Obama hasn't changed that trend toward militarization. So what we're going to talk about today, we have 3 panelists here today. We're going to talk about various aspects of that. And I can introduce each of them briefly. We'll just go this way. So Joe Nevins is a professor at Vassar College, has a piece in the report here. Suzanna Reiss teaches at the University of Hawaii, Manoa, great, which is an amazing job. I hope that someday I'm so lucky to get a job like that. And Mark Weisbrot is one of the co-directors of the Center for Economic and Policy Research in Washington, D.C. So because we're a little late, I'm just going to let you guys get started, and hopefully after each of the presentations happens, we can have a little bit of a conversation about some of the other topics that maybe we're not going to touch on in detail here, but we also want to talk about.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank NACLA for putting this together and inviting me to participate. I'm going to talk a bit about immigration, and that might not seem as a logical component of focus on militarization in Latin America, but the logic of militarization and security more broadly permeate the immigration debate and certainly the Obama administration's approach to immigration enforcement thus far. And I want to open it by actually reading an excerpt from a recent report posted on the NACLA website by Todd Miller. It was posted on March 8th of this year. It's about Haiti. 5 years after an earthquake in Haiti on January 12, an Air Force cargo plane flew one of the first missions of the U.S. military's aid effort. The plane flew for 5 hours over the devastated country, broadcasting the loud, pre-recorded voice of Raymond Josehp, the Haitian ambassador to the United States, in Creole. Quote, this is Ambassador Josehp speaking, "If you think you will reach the U.S. and all the doors will be wide open to you, that's not at all the case. They will intercept you right in the water and send you back home where you came from." End quote. The disembodied voice from the sky told Haitians, still stunned by the earthquake that killed more than 250,000 people, that U.S. immigration policy toward Haiti would remain the same as it has for decades. This was despite the fact that just a few days earlier, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security had announced 18 months of temporary protective services for Haitians who had been in the United States before January 12th, and that all deportations in process would be stopped. However, Coast Guard Lieutenant Chris O'Neill, the spokesperson for the newly formed Homeland Security Task Force in charge of managing any influx of Haitian migrants or refugees coming from that country, said simply, quote, "The goal is to interdict them at sea and repatriate them." Now, Todd goes on to write about a new mass migration plan under the Department of Homeland Security called Operation Vigilant Sentry. Right? It's prepared for the possibility of a significant outflux of Haitian migrants toward the United States by sending 16 new Coast Guard cutters to roam the waters around Haiti. The ships are on the lookout for 50-foot boats, like the one they found on February 17th, packed with 88 migrants heading towards the United States. It's the 4th such boat, according to Todd, that they returned to Haiti since the earthquake. Though officials from the U.S. claim that there hasn't been a significant increase in migration from Haiti in comparison to previous years, the Department of Homeland Security recently contracted something called the GEO Group, which is formerly known as Wackenhut Incorporated, for what they're calling God services. I have a Boston accent, right? God, G-U-A-R-D. God services. And they're going to presumably put these in a tent city in Guantanamo Bay in case of an influx of Haitian migrants. Right? Meanwhile, more space has been made available at the Chrome Detention Center in Miami, Florida. Now, the one minor amendment I would want to make to Todd's excellent report on NACLA.org is that the extension of temporary protected services or temporary protected status to Haitian migrants in the United States without authorization does not apply to all unauthorized migrants. You have to apply for temporary protected status, and you only get it if you can jump through a bunch of hoops that relate to quote-unquote criminal background. Right? If you've committed any felony and been convicted of it, right? And what constitutes a felony for a non-citizen is very different from what constitutes it for a citizen, right? So any crime that carries a penalty of 1 year or more makes you ineligible for temporary protected status. If you've committed a crime of moral turpitude, right, which in the city of New York includes jumping a subway turnstile without paying, you could be ineligible for temporary protected status. And if you've been convicted of immigration fraud, which, as you might guess, lots of undocumented or unauthorized migrants have been convicted of, you also might be ineligible for temporary protected status. So it only applies to a particular percentage, that percentage being unknown, of unauthorized Haitian migrants. That said, the larger point that he wants to make about sort of the securitized approach to Haitian migration is right on. And in many ways, what Todd writes about in the amendment I just made speaks volumes to the Obama administration's approach to immigration enforcement thus far. It's one that sees the third world, so-called third world, primarily as a security threat, right? It's one that embraces security first. It's one that takes a law and order approach with some minor, relatively liberal changes on the margins. Right? Now, sort of the first indication of what at least rhetorically, of what the Obama administration's approach might look like was provided in an address by Secretary of Homeland Security Janet Napolitano in November of last year. She said that the administration would pursue reforms that are true to an American identity that, quote, is one both as a nation of immigrants and a nation of laws, right? In this way, Napolitano asserted what the Obama administration would do would be to avoid the pitfalls of 1986.
You've been listening to the first 8 minutes of a panel discussion from the Left Forum, which took place on March 20th, 2010. The panel was organized by the North American Congress on Latin America. The topic for the panel was Obama's Militarized Status Quo in Latin America. This program is available in full at the PDX Justice Media Productions website at pdxjustice.org and at the Vimeo Home for Videos website at vimeo.com. Just search on the keywords PDX Justice and NACLA. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for supporting listener-sponsored radio, public access cable television, net neutrality, independent bookstores, and all forms of grassroots democratic community media.